The SEAL Admiral asked for her call sign as a joke, until Iron Widow left him speechless. There is a moment in every room where someone decides who matters and who doesn't. In most rooms, that moment passes so quickly that nobody notices it. But in a Pentagon briefing room on a cold February morning in 2017, that moment happened out loud. And the man who created it immediately regretted it. Rear Admiral Richard Thorne had been running joint military working groups for over a decade. He was a decorated naval special warfare officer, a genuine combat leader. The kind of man who had spent his entire career in rooms full of hard people, doing hard things. He sat at the head of the table with the easy confidence of someone who had never once doubted whether he belonged anywhere. There were 12 people in that briefing room. 11 of them were men. The 12th was a Navy commander named Elena Vasquez. She was the last presenter of the morning. She had been speaking for about 7 minutes, walking the group through a threat analysis, when the Admiral leaned back in his chair and smiled at the room in that particular way that senior officers sometimes smile when they want everyone to know they're about to say something. "Commander," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Every person in this room has a call sign. You've spent enough time embedded with the SEAL teams. What do they call you?" A couple of the men smiled. A few more glanced at each other. The question had the feeling of a joke that hadn't quite landed yet, but was expecting a laugh anyway. Elena Vasquez set her briefing folder down on the table. She looked at the Admiral the way a surgeon looks at an X-ray. Calm, certain, not rushed. "Iron Widow," she said. "Sir." The room went quiet. Not the polite quiet of people waiting for the next sentence, the actual quiet of people who had just realized something they hadn't expected to realize. One by one, the men around the table looked at the Admiral, because his face had changed. The smile was gone. In its place was the expression of a man who had just connected two things he should have connected a long time ago, and who understood exactly what that connection meant. He knew that name. Anyone who had spent real time inside naval special warfare knew that name. Iron Widow wasn't a nickname someone gave themselves. It wasn't something printed on a plaque. It was the kind of name that gets attached to a person only when the people around them, people who respect nothing except results, decide that no other name fits. He just hadn't known, until this moment, that the woman standing at the front of his briefing room was her. To understand why that name meant what it meant, you have to go back to the beginning. Not the dramatic beginning, the real one. Elena Vasquez grew up in a small city in South Texas, the daughter of a retired Marine who ran her 5 miles before school every morning, starting when she was 12 years old. Not because he was pushing her toward the military, because she asked him to. She had decided at a very early age that she wanted to be the best at something, and she was willing to do the boring, repetitive, uncomfortable work that being the best actually requires. She graduated from the Naval Academy in 2001, third in her class. Her academic focus was intelligence analysis, and her thesis on threat pattern modeling in unstable regions was flagged by the Office of Naval Intelligence before she had even received her first assignment. She was, by every measurable standard, exactly the kind of officer the military said it wanted. What she found, though, was that wanting someone on paper and actually making room for them are two very different things. In 2003, she applied for a classified assignment to a Naval Special Warfare Support Cell. She was the most qualified candidate by every metric used to evaluate the position. She was turned down without a real explanation. A senior officer wrote a single note in her file, "Not the right fit for this environment." She asked for clarification. Nobody gave her any. She filed an official inquiry. It was acknowledged, and then quietly set aside. A lot of people, at that point, would have taken the hint. Elena Vasquez did not take hints. Instead, she went to language school and learned Pashto and Dari, the two primary languages spoken in Afghanistan, in 14 months. The standard program took 22. She finished ahead of every other student in her cohort. She wasn't doing it to prove a point. She was doing it because she understood something that the officer who wrote "not the right fit" had not understood. The military doesn't actually care about your feelings, and it shouldn't. What it cares about, at the end of the day, is results. And the only way to guarantee a seat at the table where results are made is to become someone nobody can afford to leave out. In 2005, Elena was assigned as an intelligence liaison to a SEAL team troop that had one of the highest operational tempos and one of the worst casualty records in the command. The men called themselves Widowmaker. The assignment was widely understood, within the Navy, as a posting that didn't quite know what to do with an officer who didn't quite fit anywhere. The men of that troop were not rude to her, but they were skeptical in the very specific way that special operations personnel are skeptical, which means they didn't care what your resume said. They cared what you could do on a Tuesday when the information was incomplete and the stakes were real. Elena gave them a Tuesday like that in her third week. She had been working through a stack of intelligence reports that the troop had already reviewed and set aside when she noticed something. It was not obvious. It required pulling together market day records, seasonal agricultural movement patterns, and roadmaps from British colonial surveys done over 100 years ago. Documents she found in a defense archive that hadn't even been converted to digital files yet. What she found, when she put all of it together, was a pattern. The placement of roadside bombs in the area was not random. It was tied to a specific rhythm that the existing intelligence methodology had completely missed, because the existing methodology wasn't looking at things from that angle. She wrote up her findings and gave them to the troop commander, a man with a call sign that translated roughly to someone who cuts through things quickly. He read her analysis at 2 in the morning. He canceled the operation scheduled for the next day and rerouted. The original route was hit with a bomb at 6:30 in the morning, a serious, well-constructed bomb designed to do significant damage to a military convoy. Nobody from Widowmaker Troop was on that route. After that, the men didn't call her commander anymore. They started calling her something else. It took a few weeks for the name to solidify, but once it did, it stuck the way good names always stick, because it was simply accurate. She had been assigned to the Widowmakers, and she was keeping them alive. The widows weren't being made because of her. She was Iron Widow. The story that most people in the military community point to, when they talk about what that name really means, happened in 2009. Elena was assigned as the senior intelligence officer for a joint task force targeting a supply network operating across 3 provinces in eastern Afghanistan. It was a significant operation, with people from multiple agencies and military branches involved. The planning had been going on for weeks. Everyone was confident in the intelligence picture. Elena was not confident. The more she worked through the data, the more she felt that something was wrong, but it took her several days to articulate exactly what it was. What she eventually identified was that the enemy network had done something sophisticated and deliberate. They had built a false intelligence trail, not an accidental one, a designed one. The information that the task force was relying on to plan the operation had been constructed specifically to make the coalition forces go to a particular location, at a particular time, where they would be walking into an ambush. She wrote up her analysis and briefed it to the group. A senior CIA officer in the room told her she was overthinking it. An Army officer who outranked her said it sounded like fatigue, that she had been staring at the data too long and was seeing patterns that weren't there. She requested a 48-hour delay to get additional confirmation from human sources on the ground. The request was denied. The operation would proceed on schedule. Elena Vasquez then did something that, by the rules of military hierarchy, she was not supposed to do. She went directly to the 2-star general commanding the task force, not through channels, directly. At 11 o'clock at night, she walked into his office with her full documentation. She did not raise her voice. She did not make it emotional. She laid out her case in plain, structured terms, and she said something to him that people who were present would remember for the rest of their careers. She said, "Sir, I am prepared to be completely wrong about this. I am asking you to give me 48 hours to find out. If I'm wrong, you have my resignation letter tomorrow morning." The general looked at her for a long moment. Then he delayed the operation. 44 hours later, a source on the ground confirmed everything Elena had identified. The kill zone was real. There were bomb-laden vehicles and a large ambush force positioned exactly where the task force would have arrived. The operation was restructured completely, based on her corrected intelligence picture. Nobody died. The CIA officer who had called her analysis, overthought, never formally acknowledged what had happened. The Army officer was quietly reassigned. The general wrote in his personal log that Elena Vasquez had saved the mission and probably every person on it, and he recommended her for the highest non-combat decoration available to a naval officer. Elena accepted the decoration at a private ceremony. She asked that there be no press, no announcement, and no public mention. Nobody outside the community knew it happened. That was exactly how she wanted it. Here is the part of the story that doesn't get told as often, because it's less dramatic but maybe more important. Being right, in an institution, does not protect you from the institution. Elena was passed over for promotion on her first review board. The stated reason was a lack of conventional command experience. She had spent 6 years embedded with Special Operations Forces, had prevented multiple serious incidents, had been decorated for saving an entire joint task force. But the review board's checklist had specific boxes, and her career had filled in different boxes. She was promoted on the second board, but the first passover happened, and nothing was done about it, and the people responsible for it were never held accountable. That is the part of the story that doesn't fit neatly into a 3-minute video, but that anybody who has worked inside a large institution will recognize immediately. She also spent a year during shore duty writing a detailed analysis of how intelligence was being integrated into special operations at the operational level, and what structural problems were causing preventable failures. The paper was 140 pages. It was thorough, specific, and documented. She submitted it for classification review. It was reviewed and then classified at a level that meant the people who most needed to read it couldn't access it. 3 years later, her methodology was incorporated into new Special Operations Intelligence Doctrine. There was no attribution. Her name was not in the document. She was asked privately whether she minded. "I wrote it for the people in the field," she said. "They're using it. That's enough." So when Admiral Thorne sat in that briefing room in February 2017 and asked for her call sign, as what everyone in the room understood was a casual, slightly dismissive joke, he was asking the wrong person the wrong question at the wrong moment. He had no way to know that. That's the thing. He wasn't a bad man. He was simply a man who had spent his entire career in rooms that reflected his own experience back at him, and he had made the mistake that people in those rooms sometimes make, which is assuming that the unfamiliar face is the least interesting one. When she said Iron Widow and the room went quiet, it wasn't because the name was scary. It was because the Admiral's face changed in a way that told every person watching that the name meant something real. And when a man like that, a man who had built his life inside the hardest community the military produces, looks at someone with that expression, people pay attention. After the briefing ended and the room cleared out, the Admiral asked Elena to stay behind. He stood up, which was itself something people noticed, and he extended his hand. "I owe you an apology," he said, "for how I framed that question." Elena looked at him evenly. "No, sir," she said. "You owe me the same thing you owe every officer in that room. Exactly that much. I'm satisfied with that." 3 months after that conversation, without telling her, the Admiral used his personal authority to remove a bureaucratic obstacle that had been blocking the funding of a new joint intelligence training program she had designed. He made 2 phone calls. The program was funded. It has been running ever since. It has trained hundreds of intelligence officers working alongside special operations units. It has no official name in public documents. Inside the community, people call it the Iron Widow program. Elena Vasquez retired from the Navy in 2021 after 20 years of service. Her retirement ceremony was at Naval Special Warfare Command in Coronado, California. Men from every unit she had ever supported showed up. Several of them were wearing informal patches, the kind not sanctioned by any uniform regulation, showing a spider made of iron wire. In her retirement remarks, she barely talked about herself. She spoke for 11 minutes about institutional courage, about what it actually takes to submit a report that contradicts what a senior officer wants to believe, about what it means to knock on a general's door at 11 o'clock at night, knowing your career might be over by morning, about staying calm when a room full of people decides to treat your presence as something less serious than it is. "I was never trying to prove I belonged here," she said. "I belonged here. I was just trying to be useful. That is the whole job. That is all of it." After the ceremony, a young officer, newly commissioned, first assignment in the intelligence field, came up and asked her the question that younger people always want to ask someone who came before them in a hard place. "How did you stay in it? For 20 years, in a system that didn't always want you, how did you not give up?" Elena looked at her for a moment. Then she smiled. Not the practiced smile of someone giving an answer they've given before. The real smile of someone who has a simple answer and knows it's true. "You can't make people see you," she said. "You can only make yourself impossible to miss. Then you go back to work. Then she shook the young officer's hand, picked up her cover, and walked out. True real-life story. Third person. Certain names and operational details have been adjusted in line with security standards.